we all know that senior leaders in charities have not enough time and they're super busy. There's a lot of passion, there's a lot of will to do good. And there are really powerful stories. I don't think this is actually written by a human being. It starts to feel a bit formulaic. There are certain ways that the captions flow, the words that are used, the sentence structure, it's all a little bit too ChatGPT. It was such a profound experience. It was challenging. It was emotional. You go through stages of being extremely bored, of being fidgety, of feeling lonely, and they're not seeing a broad spectrum of content. They're seeing content that's reinforcing a belief, a negative belief often. That then can create a shift in their behaviour, their decisions. These days, we're now testing a fourth audience, which is using
Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Sam Knowles. And joining us today is Kerry Watkins, founder and managing director of the Brighton-based social media consultancy, Social for Good. After a stint in hospitality and hospitality training and development, Kerry has worked at the cutting edge of digital and social media marketing for the past 15 years. In 2010, she founded Social Brighton, which she refocused and rebranded as Social for Good in the early months of the pandemic. Since then, her company has exclusively helped charities and purpose-driven organisations to develop strategies and put reporting in place to get control over social media. Social for Good's website says that we champion social media for positive impact, and it's clear that this is a critical principle for Kerry in her core business, as well as in her side hustle 24/6. This project, perhaps yet to take its full and final form, is designed to help prevent, minimise and at least mitigate digital burnout. The world may be a 24/7, 365 kind of place, but Kerry advocates building regular away time from digital devices and social media channels to bring balance to the force, hence 24/6. Some of the strategies that Kerry advocates for mental well-being, including creating a phone jail to keep digital devices not only out of sight but also out of mind, were brought to life in an imaginative and inspiring workshop she and her colleague Lucy Lindley ran at last year's Brighton Summit. I can't wait to hear what's next for 24/6. It's great to have you with us, Kerry. Welcome today to Malarkey.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here.
Very good. Now listen, first off, can you tell me if that's a good narrative of how you got to where you are today? Is there anything I've missed out or got wrong? This is your chance to put the record straight.
I loved that introduction. It was brilliant. I'd say the only bit that I would add, which is like right at the beginning, which does age me somewhat, so I'm not sure why I'm bringing it up, but it's that when I worked in the hospitality sector, that's when social media became a thing. And that was what kind of sparked the idea for Social Brighton in the first place when I was back in the nightclub sector. But that's the only tiny beginning bit of the jigsaw puzzle, the first corner, if you will.
Very good. That makes it dovetail together beautifully. Now, listen, before we get down dirty with data, I wanted to start with a question that's designed to get to the heart of what makes you, you. And it doesn't necessarily ask you to tell us about the day job. So tell me, Kerry, if you would, how do you spend your time?
How do I spend my time? I spend my time balancing my life online with offline, I would say, because having worked in social for 15 years now, that was a stark contrast to working in the hospitality sector, where you're just very much there in person. There is very little time spent on social. And so that was a big change. So I think now, 15 years later, my time is spent being productive and efficient with the time that I spend online, which is I do a 4-day week. So that's 4 days, kind of 8 hours a day minimum. And I think it would be very easy for me to spend a lot more time, just I'm exhausted from the day. So I'm going to watch Netflix or scroll social on my phone. So my time is spent doing the things that I think keep me well balanced, walking the dog, playing chess, sewing, things that help my kind of well-being, my focus, doing something that's kind of more, getting into your body and kind of out of your mind. But I don't have enough people to play chess with. The family are getting a bit bored. So
I hope that doesn't mean you'll be resorting to online and digital chess.
Oh no, I have a chess app, but it's really not as rewarding as the real thing. So maybe I need to find a chess club.
Very good. I've recently, with a friend, set up a club in Lewes, just along the road from you, centered around the ancient Oriental Chinese-Japanese game of Go. And you just, I mean, yes, you can play online and the rest of it, but just that immersion in the board with the black and white pieces, I think is a brilliant way of taking one out of digital life. So bringing balance, I think is going to be a drumbeat of this conversation. Now, you've been advising all sorts of organizations on social media for 15 years or so now. Can you tell us about the way that you and your teams work with your clients to drive engagement and optimize performance in social media? I mean, it's famously difficult trying to crack the algorithms of the different platforms and so on.
It is. And the question that we try and answer for our clients in whichever way we work with them is the question that they're kind of usually unable to answer when they come to us, which is social media working for us? So if a social media manager's line manager comes up and says, so is social media working? Is it worth all the time we're putting in? That's a really hard question to answer. So we support clients in a number of ways. We might do an audit project and a strategy project for them that's kind of giving them some instant quick wins, longer term recommendations, or a strategy that tells them here's the best way to spend your time and resources to maximize your performance, full of tactics. Or some of our clients prefer to outsource their social to us. I generally don't like the term outsource because it sounds kind of like you're passing something off. We don't want to deal with social, so let's give it to you. It's not like that at all. It's a very interactive relationship, and the clients we work with are that they recognize this is a really important element of our charity or our purpose-driven business. So let's get the experts in to really kind of hit home with this and make an impact. But for some clients that we work with, they just want some training. And that's actually how Social Brighton started. It was trying to empower the good guys to manage social media themselves and not feel that they're wasting their time, and being able to answer that question, is it working for us?
So from Social Brighton to Social for Good, could you explain the reason for the pivot? And also, I'm always fascinated when people have opened kind of thriving businesses under the pandemic, but also the timing, the decision that you made and implemented in the early part of COVID back in 2020.
Yeah, so it was, I'd say, less of a pivot and more of a sidestep or a slightly different angle. But from when I started Social Brighton, I, at the very beginning, always believed social media can be really powerful in a good way. It can help businesses and charities. But because I had a kind of, what I call it, the old freelancer mindset, somebody that was newly self-employed, that was just trying to pay the rent and kind of establish some balance in this new world of not having a standard paycheck, I was very much thinking, well, anybody that wants help with social media, if they want to pay me money to help them, I'm over the moon. So we had a really broad general audience, and some of them were more rewarding than others. And anyway, that carried on for a few years. And when COVID arrived, it obviously made, I think, all of us step back and evaluate, like, what on earth's going on in the world, but also how on earth does my business remain valid and resilient? And do I need to change what I'm doing? And coming up to that point, so just backtracking slightly, I had this conflict with social media. Bringing up a daughter, I was terrified of the day that she would be like, Mum, can I have Instagram? Mum, can I have Snapchat? And I thought, if that in my gut terrifies me, I'm working in social media. Like, how do I kind of sleep well at night with these two things going on? And if anything in her life would be negatively impacted by social, I was worried about cyberbullying, body image issues, all the rest of it. I would never forgive myself for being somebody that worked in social media. So I kind of had this conflict building, but wasn't really sure what to do with it. But I'd started to include in our messaging and our marketing that went out there, use social media for social good. Don't just use it for the sake of it. Try and improve what you're putting out there to make the social landscape a better place. So this messaging had started to kind of creep in an effort for me to feel like, well, at least we're doing positive things in the landscape. And then when COVID happened and it all kind of, blew up, and we're all suddenly carrying our laptops home or our computers home in our cars, wondering how we're going to cope, It was, do you remember the hour of exercise that Boris Johnson gave us each day? And I used to go and run along Hove Seafront. I'd be working at home all day in my bedroom because the living room was the home school. And to punctuate the day, would go out for this run and then come home, and then I would be finished work. So on one of these runs, I was just thinking about, so social media for social good. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it really kind of encapsulate what we're trying to do. And that's when I just came up with social for good. Maybe we just really put a flag in it, use social for good, also use us as an agency. But anyway, that's where it kind of came together. And Callum and I, the other director, had a review of, let's look at who we've worked with over the past 6 years. Let's look at which of those contracts were not only profitable, but where did we feel we added the most value to that organization? What benefit did we get from working on that? Like, did it challenge us? Did we learn something? Do we feel rewarded by that project? So we did this kind of analysis and realized that about 50% of our clients over the past 6 years fell into this, what we call the good guys. 50% we weren't particularly excited about kind of going after that kind of work. So this really helped us go, okay, let's rebrand. Let's really just say we're only going to use social for good. We're only going to help the people that are doing something good in the world. And that's where it kind of happened. So we didn't do a huge rebrand as such, but we very clearly changed our messaging and everything that we all felt, we felt about, wanting to do good in the world. It suddenly became part of our brand. And we just, we're wearing our heart on our sleeve with this brand and putting it out there. And it's one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Very good, very good. I'm so much of what you say is inspirational about kind of following your passion, and then not quite the field of dreams. If we build it, they will come. But you are exhibiting and manifesting that passion, and that's clearly infectious. I love the fact that the idea or the expression of it came to you when you're out on a run. I'm fascinated about the process of insight and all of the. I've worked a lot with, and have been myself, but worked a lot with strategic planners in comms agencies. Every single one of them, without exception, is a runner, and every single one of them has told, or sometimes a cyclist and sometimes a swimmer, but almost always a runner, and will say that they don't go out on a run in order to solve, but the act of changing your respiration, changing your perspective, changing your heart rate can allow those old things to join together and make something genuinely new. So I'm inspired to hear that was exactly the moment that happened for you. You don't necessarily. I mean, I don't know if you came, if it happened when you were running, or you came back and thought, there it is. But so often that happens. Paul McCartney is said to have dreamt yesterday 3 times. He didn't write it down twice, but the third time he wrote it down immediately. These moments, or I have waterproof crayons in the shower, because you don't know when it's going to happen, but you've got to be able to capture it. The other thing, go on.
I was going to say, well, annoyingly, I can't run anymore because of my knees, because I ran so much for so many years. But you're right in that I always felt those moments when you're out running, you don't purposely try and solve any challenges or come up with new ideas, but it just happens. But when I realized I kind of had to give up, it went trail running for a little while, and then just, no, you have to stop, or the chiropractor bills are going to get very expensive. I then discovered my new thing for that, which I hope still manages to tick that box, is sauna and cold sea swimming. Cold water swimming, and that change in respiration and a bit of time where you can't look at your phone and you're just in the moment. I think the brain does something good.
I think you're absolutely right, and you're right. You're not going to take a phone into a sauna. One, it'll be steamy, and two, it'll probably say that
it'll die.
It'll die. But absolutely, that hot cold contrast. I'm completely with that. The other thing I wanted to ask was. We spoke recently to a guy who runs a data-driven PR consultancy, a guy called Daryl Sperry from Hard Numbers, and he started his business similar time to you. I mean, he started his business from scratch under the pandemic. Did you get a benefit not only from having that kind of clarity of purpose, and this is why we're here? Did you get a benefit from the fact that companies, organizations, in your case, particularly charities and purpose-led organizations, still had marketing budgets, but they couldn't do anything physical. They couldn't hold an event. And so there was a need to spend money. And if there's a clearly defined offer to go after, then that allows you to cement in with it.
Absolutely. After the initial kind of, everything stopped and people were reevaluating, we then got very busy for that very reason. Like you said, people couldn't do a lot of the events or conferences they were doing. And suddenly that bullet point that's kind of 6 points down of let's sort our social media out became the top of the list. So we had a really strong period of growth. After we kind of hit, I think we hit the same turnover as last year during the pandemic, and then we had a really steep period of growth afterwards. And maybe the pandemic did kickstart this. We can't ignore digital any longer. We need to be connecting with our audiences there from an organizational point of view.
Now, you talked about training being a way. And can you tell us a bit about, I know you run Accelerator programs for social media managers in charities and purpose-led organizations. Can you tell us a bit about what they're like?
So the Accelerator was the kind of brainchild that came to me following a program called Help to Grow, which I know you were on as well. And the benefit I got from doing this program, that I think it's been described as like a mini MBA or kind of thing, was that you get that distance from your business. So the pandemic kind of gave me a bit of distance from it, and we had a big change. And then a few years later, I kind of looked at, we'd grown a lot. Our clients tended to get kind of bigger and bigger. But then there are a lot of organizations that don't want to use a social agency on a strategy or have them manage the social accounts for them. But there's still a way to work with them to kind of empower their teams. And the Accelerator, I realized, was necessary as a training program. It's an 8-week training program just for charities. So not even for purpose-driven brands, but very charity specific. There wasn't another training course out there that I've managed to find so far that really caters for that specific audience. So we poured everything that we have learnt over the past 15 years collectively into this training program. So it's for small charities or perhaps it's a new comms exec in a larger social media team. I realized that's needed by charities. It felt like a really great way to be able to support a lot more charities that don't have big budgets. When we designed it, I was really keen that we didn't just say, here's everything we know, here's the format, you can pay for it or not. But we decided to co-design it with charities. So we managed to survey a lot of social media managers in the non-profit sector, which puts our kind of launch line back a bit. But I thought this was really important. They told us these are the biggest challenges we have. These are the things that we're really keen to learn about. And here's the format that we think would work best. So we put the Accelerator together, and it's genuinely co-designed with charities. So it's really fit for purpose. Of course, the social media landscape changes at a daily rate. So, we're challenged to kind of keep the content relevant and up to date, but it teaches them everything they need to know to develop a strategy, learn which channels to use, how to create a content plan, how to build community, how to report on success, how to use data, kind of everything. And it's something I'm really proud of. And we've been doing it for 12 months now, and another 60 places in 2026. Up for grabs.
Fantastic. Well, listen, we'll include a link in the show notes for that for sure. And I haven't had anything quite as transformational in terms of new product development from Help to Grow, but I thought that the space and the conversations and the case studies that I mean, you were one of the reasons that I decided to go on it. But your great experience of it, but I think it's a really, really interesting way of just kind of working on the business rather than working in the business, and providing you that mental kind of headspace and living room. And I so commend you for that, as you say. It may have slowed down the rollout of the first, but that co-creation, if individuals, organizations, or ways of working can recognize themselves in what you're providing, they're going to be that much more enthusiastic. So completely with you there. What are charities and purpose-led organizations, they maybe point in a slightly different direction, but the typical mistakes that they make using, let's say LinkedIn, are they distinct from the false steps that commercial organizations make, or does everyone tend to behave in the same way?
There are some similarities in the mistakes, a lot of similarities in the mistakes that charities and your regular businesses make. However, the kind of solution to fixing those is quite different for charities or businesses. So you said, let's say LinkedIn, for example, the typical mistakes that we see are relying solely on the company LinkedIn page rather than utilizing your personal LinkedIn profile or that of senior leaders or other people within the team. LinkedIn particularly wants people to network with other people. So if everything comes from a page, you're kind of limited in terms of your reach. And I think businesses are that, they're very keen when we explain this, your business development part of the team or kind of partnerships. They get going with it quite quickly. That can be quite challenging within a charity where time and resource is an issue. And we all know that senior leaders in charities have not enough time and they're super busy. But those that are really savvy on LinkedIn and are really passionate can make a huge impact on, awareness and an interest in that charity. Another mistake that's common to both is, and I'm certainly not tarnishing everybody with this brush, but something that we see quite a bit is the content that goes out on LinkedIn can tend to be a bit dry, it's a bit of a kind of like notice board content. We're doing this, here's an update, here we are. And that's, I think, because sometimes LinkedIn feels like the boring briefcase of the social media suite. And I get that, but it's my favorite network still out of all of them. And it's a thriving social network. And actually, if you treat LinkedIn as you do other networks and think we need to add value to our audience, we have to make it worth their while engaging with us. LinkedIn can sometimes have the biggest engagement rate of any network, certainly with charities that we've worked with. And I'd say the other biggest mistake is not using LinkedIn is as a social channel. It's often still seen very much, because people are time poor, as broadcasting, and we just need to put content out there. Let's try and get 2 or 3 or 4 posts a week and tick that box and get it out there, and then you move on to the next thing. And again, if you reduced your content output a bit, this is very kind of generic advice, but it tends to be what we're talking to charities about at the moment. Reduce your content output a little bit. You might see the data might show you that performance, okay, slightly less impressions and reach. But if you spend that time doing what we call proactive comms or proactive engagement, connecting with the right people, having conversations with them, seeing what they're talking about, joining those conversations, you've got a whole different set of metrics to report on success. And these are ones around relationship building. So they can be really strong. It goes back to what success looks like for any particular organization. And it's not the same. There's not one standard set of performance metrics that is successful for everybody. But that's where we see a difference. And the thing with charities and purpose-driven brands that they have in common is that there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of will to do good, and there are really powerful stories about the people that they're helping or the beneficiaries that are impacted as a result of their work. And sometimes people are just a little bit pre-working with us, a little bit too close to that to see the value in creating content around that and sharing that. So that's why I love working with the good guys, because you're doing brilliant things. You're being a bit British about it. Let's put it out there, and people want to celebrate with other people. And we're seeing really kind of great results. But LinkedIn's a really interesting one, because I think people forget that it can be a really powerful channel like some of the others.
Cracking advice from those 3 common errors, as you say, not unique to charities and purpose-led organisations, but exemplified there. I think it's fair. I'm not saying that we've reached any kind of endpoint, but I think it's fair to say that social media platforms are now in a state of maturity. They have their differences in functionality and addressable audiences and things that the algorithms like and dislike more in one or another. But there's more. I think it's fair to say there's more that kind of that's the same and that sets them apart. But just thinking about AI for a little bit, is the rapid spread and march of AI, is that changing both social media and so the guidance that you give?
It has changed social media, like how the social networks are working themselves, obviously, but it has also changed the guidance that we give. Um, the algorithms are getting more and more sophisticated. I mean, whether I like that or not, from an individual perspective is a different story. But there's one benefit of that to us as an agency, especially in the world of ads, is that the ad targeting. I was chatting to Callum recently, who does a lot more in the world of paid social than I do anymore. But when we test ads for a client to try and get the most impact for them, he'd often test three audiences, which is you're targeting based on interests. You've got a warm audience and a lookalike audience. These days, we're now testing a fourth audience, which is using automatic targeting based on, this is in Meta, based on the data that they have from algorithms. And he said that we're seeing very often that that is the highest performing audience. So the network itself is better at targeting the right people to get the results that you want in many instances, more than how we would do ads in the old days, which is common sense. They'd be interested in this, this, or this, or they've looked at our website before. So that's beneficial for us as an agency, because, you know, it's helping us get better results for clients who have limited budget and doing good stuff. There are downsides to AI, I think, from the way that agencies can use AI or people working in social. Image generation, I know that there's a lot of talk around Mid-Journey. We don't use it ourselves, but, you know, creating great images really quickly that can be used on social. However, I have seen no change in the insights I've learned over 15 years that people want to see real people. They want to see the people that are working within the organization, that are impacted by the organization. So we haven't felt the need to go there. For other types of services and organizations, I'm sure it's very useful, but for us, that's not changed. We're using it internally in a couple of interesting ways that's useful for our clients. One is to make content more accessible, more quickly. It takes time to create alt text, for example, for every image that you're sharing on social, but we've created a custom GPT that can do that almost instantly. It still gets checked by a human, but it saves us time, which is great because then we have more time for the strategic thinking and the creativity. And we've also found it really useful in terms of brand voice GPT. So we're creating custom brand voices just to make sure that whether it's an individual or an organization that we're writing for, that it's really specifically 100% on brand. Because that's always been a challenging thing for any copywriter to do, is to kind of change hats quickly throughout the day. Again, it's not taking away the human oversight of it, but again, they're just things that are helping us streamline. And internal processes as well, and some content analysis. I think AI is being used a lot more in the last 12 months in my sector. But a downside is that I think we're all perhaps noticing, you know, you might read captions on social and you're thinking, I don't think this is actually written by a human being. It starts to feel a bit formulaic. There are certain ways that the captions flow, the words that are used, the sentence structure, it's all a little bit too ChatGPT. And that then has implications of, do we trust that organization that are using that? It doesn't feel as authentic. You know, humans aren't, generally, I'd say humans aren't stupid, and we're picking up on that. So I think there's a risk there, and trust and authenticity are essential for good social, in my opinion. There's another issue if organizations are using chatbots to do moderation on ads or organic content. It can be great at spotting things that need escalating or that need addressing, or moderating content that includes profanity or hate speech. That's very useful. But if it starts to reply and have conversations with people, especially with charities where a lot of the topics can be disturbing or upsetting, you know, I don't advocate the use of chatbots for that. They're certainly not sophisticated enough now. And I think that again can derail any rapport or trust that an organization has with the end user. So, you know, as with many of the things I've said, a bit of a love-hate relationship with it at the moment.
Yeah, I'm very really interested in the way that companies are using chatbots, and I would always, in a customer service perspective, I always, how can I help you? I'd like to speak to somebody. No, but I'm here to help you. I'm really here to help you. And I found that if you give a sort of second or third level contingency, this, but that, but this, they say, that's too complicated. I'm going to escalate it quickly. So there are some hacks around it. You touched on it. You touched on it several times, this inherent or apparent contradiction in kind of charitable goals and purpose on one hand, and the very real negative impacts that too much social media can have on mental health on the other, particularly younger users. You talked about your daughter. Is there anything else that you'd want to say about how you kind of square the circle of your business and the darker side of social media, if you want to call it that?
I think social media isn't going anywhere. As you mentioned earlier, it's become a very complex landscape. And it can be used for good. So I think, as with anything, there are downsides and upsides. I just choose to look into the lights, if you like, and just say, okay, it's not going anywhere. Let's make sure it's being used in the best way possible. And if through our work and our kind of conversations and communities that we interact with, we can try and make the social media landscape a more positive place and think about how we use it ethically, think about what we're putting out there, then that kind of squares it off for me as well. Yeah, I feel like that could be a whole other podcast, but that probably summarizes my response.
Good, very good. Now, listen, is that one of your motivations behind 24/6? I mean, I found the branding of it and the what I grasped of the concept of it to be really exciting. Can you tell us kind of where it is today and where you think it might go? I suggested, I hope not unkindly, that you didn't think it had quite found its final form yet.
Not unkind at all, and very true. So I'd say since COVID, I think it was during COVID, I started studying digital well-being. That was out of a desire to educate myself as a parent more than anything about digital behavior, the relationships that we as humans and as young people, my daughter was approaching teenage years back then, the relationship we have with tech, how does that impact our mental health, our behavior, physical health? And I just felt it's this, like I said earlier, I was worried about the impact of social, but didn't really have the knowledge to arm myself to know what to do about that. So I focused on doing good stuff through my work. But when I started studying digital well-being, while a whole world of knowledge was then available to me, and my mind was blown. And again, probably a good year or two, I didn't really know what to do with it. But I learned so much about our hormones in our brain, neuroscience, behavior change, willpower, multitasking, every element of life that's impacted by not just our smartphones, but the way that we live and work today. And I hadn't thought that this would ever be a business. It was literally just to try and make myself understand more so I could think about how do I guide my daughter into the world of social and digital in a way that she comes out as unscathed as possible. And there's some hard conversations, but I couldn't just share all of this with her at once because, she was, I think, like 13 or 14. And, you can't explain about neuroplasticity and when your prefrontal cortex is fully developed. And that's why you can't use that app for more than 10 minutes a day and so on. So I kind of had enough information to try and guide her. But then I still felt a bit, just there was some kind of energy around this. I thought I want to do something, but I don't know what it is. So I decided to go on a digital detox and see if I could do it, see how it felt. I thought the thought of it actually really scared me. As somebody that loves work, I love technology. I think it's great. I'm certainly not advocating for, living off grid and foraging for berries. But yeah, I felt really nervous about doing a detox. So I thought, well, because I feel so nervous about it, I should do it. I should challenge myself. So I went to Catalonia with Anastasia, who you know from Consciously Digital Institute. And it was such a profound experience. It was challenging. It was emotional. You go through stages of being extremely bored, of being fidgety, of feeling lonely. But suddenly your brain is actually starting to process your thoughts in a different way, to process your emotions, because you can't pick up your phone when you're just like, okay, I feel I've got nothing to do, or I feel a bit lonely and I haven't seen my family, so I'm just going to pick up my phone. You actually had to sit with that uncomfortableness. And that's something I hadn't done since the first iPhone came out. Um, and I left that experience with what I could only describe as a sparkly brain. I remember being on the bus back to Barcelona airport, buzzing with ideas. And that's where 24/6 started. I started to think about it. It wasn't called that then, but it's like, I need to do something with this. I don't know if it's with young people. I don't know if it's with adults like me who grew up without a smartphone. Perhaps that's more a relatable audience to me, but I knew I wanted to do something. My brain felt like spring clean, sparkly, full of energy, full of ideas. And that lasted for a little while, but inevitably your old habits kind of come back again. I wasn't reading as many books. I took my crocheting and Sudoku book with me to Catalonia. Suddenly I wasn't doing any of that. And I realized it's really hard to change your habits and behavior. I went on a second detox which is a year ago now, to Sardinia, which was a different experience. There was a lot more, there were a lot more activities planned in the day. It was a lot more fun. So you weren't left with as much alone time to feel uncomfortable, but it still gave a lot of benefits. And when I got back from that, I think it was around then, Brighton Chamber asked me to do a workshop um, around the summit. The theme of the summit was 24/7, always on. And so I thought, well, what can I call my workshop? So I came up with 24/6, and it just seemed like a good name, which has stuck: how to avoid being always on. And we shared some research in that workshop about the impact of smartphones and technology on our sleep, our relationships, our physical health, our well-being. We did some little activities. And I didn't know what would come from that workshop, but it was nice to be able to channel that energy into doing something. And I love working with people, and actually being with people in real life. Perhaps that stems back to the hospitality days. But the feedback I got after that workshop was phenomenal. And it was really clear to me, people need this. People don't really know what to do to address their own things that are annoying about their smartphones. And the conversation we had in the room involved, people being, my partner does this, or my kids do this, and suddenly realized everybody has an opinion on this, and most people are just not happy with the way that they use technology. So that's really where it came from. And so I kind of working with a brilliant designer, created a brand. I've got a website live, but that's kind of as far as I've got. I have learned over the years that not to plan everything to the finest detail, but I much prefer to put something out there, and then collaborations. I've already had invitations for collaborations on where to take this forward, who to work with, what does that look like. So I think over the next 12 months, it's going to find the form that it needs. But at the moment, it's very simple. I can come and run a workshop around it to kind of help teams in the workplace think about how they use their time better to be more productive, which we've learned a lot about by doing the 4-day week, of course, at Social for Good. Or I'd really love to do some kind of community days with groups of people who just want to leave their smartphone at home, or maybe I look after it because I have to find out where we are. And we get back into nature and we just kind of explore some of the themes that I've learnt, just to give them a little bit more awareness. And maybe that's enough to spark something to make their lives at home or work a little bit better. But I'm excited to see where it will go.
Brilliant. I love the description of your sparkly brain. I remember that in the workshop, and I think it's such a fantastic, because the opposite is the sort of the dull, blunted. A recent former guest, a woman called Christine Rosen from the American Enterprise Institute, on the podcast. She's written a book called "The Extinction of Experience: Reclaiming Our Humanity in a Digital World," and she has the book jacket is beautifully designed. It's a fantastic vista of a mountain and a lake viewed through a smartphone. And she brings forward all sorts of evidence that shows that mediated lives are inferior and less engaging and less memorable. I was thinking that just the night before we recorded this, I was at Oasis's possibly last ever UK gig, certainly the last on this tour, on their reunion tour, and just the number of people who were just recording every single thing. Well, it might be your last opportunity to do it, but you actually aren't experiencing it. What you're experiencing it is pushing people out of the way who are getting in the way of your. So anyway, but Christine talks a lot about the benefits of being bored and how important being bored is, and how that can unlock creativity. It feels frustrating. Everything you describe in Catalonia and Sardinia, I can understand, but that. On the route to the sparkly brain, being bored paradoxically is perhaps a very important step. Just before we round out, I wanted to ask what was if you have one, either generically or specifically, the worst misuse of data that you've ever witnessed during your career working in social media.
The worst misuse of data, I think I'll first share one that's perhaps not the worst misuse, but a common misuse of data that annoys me through my work, is that we have seen reports that, not that we've created, but social media reports from other agencies, or previous internal reports that our clients have shared with us, that is just a lot of data. It's just, there's some numbers and charts, because there's so much data available with social media. You can't report, or you shouldn't report on everything, because it doesn't tell you anything. We have a very simple 3-step process to our reporting, which is data, insights, recommendations. So we analyze the data. We say, what's there? Well, first of all, analyze the relevant data, deciding what the relevant data is, and then the insights. So what has that taught us? What have we learnt? Comparing that to the previous month, the previous year, another competitor or whatever. And then what are we going to do with what we've learned? What are the recommendations? And we believe in being very transparent. And it was really nice actually to hear this recently from a new client that decided to work with us, who said, no, it was a reference that they received actually from another client that said they're very transparent, Social for Good, great agency, and they'll tell you what's not working. And I think there's a misuse of data I've seen, just to share a lot of numbers that might look impressive, but one, it doesn't tell the organization anything useful that they can do with, and two, it doesn't share what's working. So I think it's important to share what is working, what isn't working, but what you're going to do with that. So that's kind of one misuse of data I see. And also, as part of that, what success looks like to any one organization is very different to another. And we're very insistent on having this process at the beginning of any project where we're saying, what does success look like? And people just write down statements on Post-it notes. And for one organization, it could be a retweet from David Attenborough. For another organization, it could be a 2% increase in Instagram engagement. It doesn't matter, but what success looks like is very different. And then we need to set objectives, from awareness through to engagement, through to taking meaningful action, through to advocacy, thinking about reputation and sentiment. So choosing the right data points along that audience journey then starts to give you a really useful report that you can share with clients. So that's not the worst misuse of data, but it's one that bugs me, and that I think people can do better with data in our sector. But I think really the first thing that comes to mind as the worst misuse of data is, and this might sound ironic considering my profession, but algorithms, especially on Instagram and TikTok, because social networks want people to use social networks more because of the business model. I get that, but it's not an ideal business model. I think it should be a different business model that is better for us as humans, rather than just making them billions of dollars. But the algorithms, to get people using social networks more, will exploit and target people's vulnerabilities. So the content that is often seen, it causes outrage, sadness, anxiety, loneliness. And that creates this cortisol loop in the brain. And the cortisol tells us, okay, I don't feel good, I need to do something. And that do something is watch more content. So you kind of end up, this is not good for the individual that's watching it. But what's really scary with that is they keep people engaged more and more. And then they're in this, they're not seeing a broad spectrum of content. They're seeing content that's reinforcing a belief, a negative belief often. And that then can create a shift in their behavior, their decisions. And that really worries me for young people who haven't, as like us in middle age, have grown up without smartphones. We have a different frame of reference. Our prefrontal cortexes have been wired to the point in our 20s in a certain way, but young people are being influenced in a negative way, I think. And when you read articles, about Instagram, where people are seeing young women or young girls are seeing self-harm videos, TikTok, there's rise of misogyny last year, and seeing that, that brilliant drama, Adolescence with Stephen Graham. This is the thing that scares me. And I think a lot of it comes down to a misuse of data because of the business model of social networks. I can't change that as an individual. I'm not sure how that changes in the future. So I think if more people are aware of that, and if young people are aware of that, it at least will hopefully make people feel I don't want to be manipulated by that and to kind of step outside of it. Sorry, that's a dark answer for the end of it, but that still troubles me.
It's great. I mean, it's a dark question. It's no coincidence, is it, that the senior executives of all sorts of tech and social platforms do not allow their children access to their own products and to the hardware to access them for as long as they possibly can. It is no coincidence. That is widely reported by many, both an employee and a whistleblower, and indeed kind of almost as a badge of pride by some of the leaders of some of the biggest, most divisive. No, I'm completely with you. That's brilliant. Kerry, that's fantastic. Finally, where can our listeners and our viewers find out about you and your work online and I'm sure in social media?
So socialforgood.co.uk that's our website with everything about the work that we do for purpose-driven brands. And 246.co.uk, that's the number 24 and the word 6. That was a silly domain choice because now I have to explain it every time. But 246.co.uk is where you can learn more about why I started that brand and what it kind of stands for. And if anybody has anything they want to get involved with or collaborate on to help me make this a thing in the future, just send me an email.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time today, Kerry. If only there were more people with your approach and your perspective, and I mentioned in a slightly silly Star Wars reference, bringing balance to the Force, I think there would be rather less malarkey in the world of social media and rather more data-driven common sense. Kerry Watkins, founder of Social for Good, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I loved our chat. Cheers, Sam.